In this episode, we're talking about the topic that none of us really want to explore. It's violence, specifically violence in schools, and how we help our kids deal with the anxiety and the worries that come with all that mess. Let's get into it. If you think being a dad is filled with rewards, challenges, or headaches, and you keep pushing forward because you know this is the most important job you're ever going to do, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Dad's All In podcast. Welcome in, fellow dads. I hope you're doing great out there. I hope your week was wonderful. Your family's doing awesome. It's just good to have you here, my friend. In this episode, I want to talk a little bit about exploring what we do as fathers, what we do as parents to try to help our kids deal with the anxiety and the challenges and the worries of safety, specifically within school systems. My wife and I have developed, I guess we'll call it an approach through the years that we use with our kids, but I want you to know, obviously, I'm not a licensed professional in this area. I'm not an expert in this area. And so if your child needs extra help in this area, please reach out for professional help. I've said this many times before, but it is not a sign of weakness to reach out and get extra help for your kid or for yourself. It's actually a sign of strength, a sign of courage, because you're willing to say, hey, here's something my child needs to get better at, or here's something that my child is struggling with, and I'm going to reach out and find a way to help them. So again, if your child is struggling with anxiety and worries and just not feeling safe within schools or in community in general, you do not have to tackle that all alone. Find some professional help who can help you so you can help them, but also who can talk with them and help them work through some of these really intense feelings. So this particular episode and also the YouTube video that I put out recently was prompted by the horrific day where there was a school shooting in Colorado, followed by the death of a political activist in Utah, Charlie Kirk, which I'm sure you've heard about. And my take on all of that is it's all horrific. It's just tough to know that there's people out there who want to do harm to others, whether they agree with or don't agree with certain philosophies, or specifically, in this case, and what I'm getting into in this episode, are willing to do harm to children, to teenagers in school systems, to the staff in school systems, because of some vendetta or some personal belief that they have. It's all just scary. It's all just sad. It's really sad that that's where our society is as a whole. Now, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of my opinions on how we fix all this, because it is a lot more complex than most people think. On one hand, gun control, would that help? Possibly. On the other hand, mental health support, extra identification of individuals who need extra support and mental health, would that help? Probably. I will give you my opinion on the whole topic, but I'm not really getting into it, and I respect you for your opinion, whatever it is that you have. But I will tell you, as somebody who, at the forefront of my brain, is help kids at all costs, I would just like us to do away with automatic weapons. If it's going to save even one or two kids, it's definitely worth it. And that's my take, and I'm just throwing it out there from the jump so you know. But that's not what this episode is about. Instead, in this episode, I want to focus on what my wife and I have done to try to approach this very hard conversation, this very hard topic to help our kids, knowing that our kids, all three of them, have struggled greatly with this particular idea. And I'm going to guess your kids have too, whether they'll admit it or not. How could they not? School violence is scary. And as somebody who for many years used to have to help kids through lockdown drills, I handled it all in a very sensitive way. In other words, I gave kids some very surface level information of why we would do these particular lockdown drills, but I wouldn't deep dive into it because I know they'll sit there and they'll worry not just that day, but for days to come. The very first day of school, I would always say, it is my job as the teacher, as the number one thing that I have to make sure I do, is to keep you safe. And I told them that the first day, and I told them this many other days beyond, because that was literally, and it is literally, the goal of education now. But for you at home, how do you approach all this? So I'm going to share with you some things that my wife and I have done. This is not a perfect system. It's the system for our family, and I still struggle with it. I'm being open here. Like, this is still, it's not perfect, but we've tried to figure out something that might work for us, specifically for our kids. You just need to figure out what's going to work best for your kids. And again, if this conversation is heavy, and it absolutely is, but I mean specifically for your child, you don't have to go with this alone. Reach out and get some professional help to help you and your child with this. So the first thing I would tell you when you approach this is understand the age of your child and understand their individual brain. If you've listened to previous episodes, you know that's come up multiple times. I keep going back to that. Every child is different. But let me start with the age first. If your child is young, like pre-K, 5 years old, even into the early elementary years, you probably need to turn the news off when they're talking about school violence. When they walk into the room, I'm not sure they need that extra exposure. It's not going to help them. It's going to increase their anxiety if they know that there's deranged people who are targeting schools. And as they get older in the elementary years, what's important then is for you to know how your child thinks. Some kids are deep thinkers, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a very good strength. The downside of that is they chew on things internally a bit more. There are some kids who brush things off and it doesn't bug them one way or the other. They're more worried about being kids and floating through life. However, it's entirely possible you could have a 12-year-old and they're still not ready to sit down and watch the news and see the things that are developing on any given day that are specific to school violence. And if that's the case, that is okay. I've got a couple of those. As a matter of fact, all 3 of our kids, we monitor and keep tabs on how much they're exposed to these topics. Do you know why? It's because we don't want them to have to go to school and feel unsafe. We don't want them to have to go to school and worry about, is something bad going to happen today? Because we want them to go to school and worry about, I need to be the best student I can be. I need to be the best human I can be. And if your brain has those kinds of intense thoughts, it creates stress. And when your brain is stressed, it cannot function as well. It's just basic brain science. And this is why my wife and I have been very strategic about how we approach things. Just last night, I was watching the news, 9 o'clock. One of my daughters started coming down the steps. I turned it off. I didn't want them to see the news about Charlie Kirk or the previous shooting that happened in Colorado. I didn't want them to have to spend the rest of their night and heading into the next day worrying about it. However, this does come with a caveat. You probably need to have some kind of discussions with your kids, especially when they move to later in elementary, definitely into middle school, because kids talk. And not every parent is going to think like you and I do. And some parents are going to just unload all the information on their kids. And then when the kid comes to school, they're going to unload all that information on their friends or their peers or anybody they can talk to about it. And their brains are not fully developed, obviously. So they don't know how to filter information and share it with others in ways that aren't going to scare other kids. And what are kids going to do? Kids are going to act like it doesn't bother them. But in reality, the vast majority of them, it's going to. It's going to stick with them whether they show it or not. It's going to be in the back of their brain. And rightly so. This is scary stuff. So how do you approach these conversations? I would say it depends on your child, how deep you want to go. If they're ready for a deeper conversation, they're a little bit older, then feel free. But if they're not, even if they're 16 years old, and if this information is going to wreck their day and they're not going to be able to function, give them a filtered version. But here's the thing I need you to share with them. Let them know right now they are okay. And when they go to school, their staff have been trained in ways to help keep them safe. Is it perfect? No. We're dealing with humans here. And in this case, when we're talking about school violence and shooting violence, it's people who are not fully stable. People who have deep-seated anger and they're looking for a way to either create payback or just release their anger in very unhealthy ways. But right now you can say you're okay and you've got a school that staff is looking out for your safety. So you need to make sure that if anything ever happened, and hopefully it never does, but if it were to ever happen, just follow their lead. The reason we have these drills is because we want to keep you safe. That's the general message you can share with your kids. Is this system perfect? No, not at all. Now, my son is an adult now. He's 18. He's in college. And I can tell you, it hasn't been to the last couple of years that he and I and my wife and I and him have all talked about deeper level things about violence. You want to know why? Because he's a deep thinker and he will store it in his brain. And I think he'll be okay with me sharing this, but he was deeply concerned about the shooting of Charlie Kirk, about the Colorado shooting. And he wasn't deeply concerned as far as he believed everything that Charlie Kirk does. He was more concerned about, I can't believe people will create violence because they don't believe what somebody else believes. And he went further to say, I can't believe that people still just go into schools and just shoot them up. Poor innocent kids. It's heartbreaking. And as a parent, it's concerning. So you need to attack this whole situation on an individual basis. You do not need to expose your kid to everything and all the information that's happening. You want to be careful with how much you give to them. And in some cases, you need to give them some surface level information, enough so that if kids at school are talking about it, they're not going to be floored and taken back by it. If you've been listening, you know that I'm not a believer in absolutes for a vast majority of things. Usually the answers lie somewhere in the middle. So it's not all or nothing. It's not, you know what, I'm telling my 5-year-old everything I know about school violence. And it also shouldn't be, I'm not telling my 16-year-old about any of it. The answer is somewhere in the middle, and really the answer lies with you and your child. What is their brain ready to hear? And what do they need to go to school so they can function and feel safe? At least safe enough so that their brain's not completely stressed about school safety and violence in general. I do want to finish up on an additional piece here that's targeted towards kids and helping kids with anxiety. And having multiple kids who struggle with anxiety, I can tell you, we keep learning more and more about their individual brains, which is awesome and challenging all at the same time, right? But anxiety as a whole, and yes, you can throw violence as one of the reasons, but there's many, many more. Anxiety as a whole in our youth is just through the roof with the numbers. The number of kids who've been diagnosed and the number of kids who experience anxiety who are not diagnosed. And are we surprised? Look at our society as a whole. It's a hot mess. There is no reason that we should be surprised that kids are struggling with anxiety, whether it be elementary school, all the way up to teen years and beyond. And yes, adults as well. So here's a couple things that we've learned specifically to what your child can do to help them get through the day if they're feeling uneasy, they're anxious about maybe feeling safe at school, worried about violence in school. So the first thing I would say is they can take something to school and keep something appropriate and small in their pocket. So maybe it's a small piece of a blanket. Maybe it's a really small stuffed animal or a small fidget that doesn't make a lot of noise. And I say that because sometimes just sticking your hand in your pocket and feeling something that's comforting in one way or another is a trigger to your brain that says, okay, I'm okay right now. And then talk with your kid about self-regulation talk. In other words, self-talk is helpful. You want them to pretty much convince themselves that I'm okay. I don't need to worry about this right now. Instead, I'm going to focus on being the best I can at school. But sometimes having something in your pocket can be helpful. The other thing that I've learned, and my wife and I have learned this recently, like in the last couple weeks, much to our surprise, sour candy is an amazing tool to help kids, and not just kids, individuals with anxiety, because it is a trigger for your brain that immediately takes your thoughts away from whatever it is that you're worried about, because it's so sharp, the taste and the flavor is so sharp, all of a sudden your brain is like, ooh, that's a real kick of flavor. And it takes their mind away from it for a minute, and it kind of gives you and your brain the ability to just reset. Now, you're probably sitting there thinking, well, will teachers allow my kid to have a piece of a blanket in their pocket and pop in sour candy whenever they need it? Some probably will, if you talk with them about it ahead of time. However, if your child gets identified with an anxiety disorder, meaning that you've worked with a professional provider and they've been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, you can then get what's called a 504 plan, which allows your child to get accommodations in school. And written within that 504 plan, you can have things like they can have a small stuffed animal in their pocket so they can touch it for comfort when they need to. Or they can pop in some sour candy if they're feeling overwhelmed or anxious. These are also good things for like test anxiety, social anxiety, all these other anxieties. These are just a couple. There's many, many more. Breathing obviously is another one, right? Like specific kinds of belly breathing and things like that that can be helpful. So there's certain things that you can work with your child to figure out, hey, what's the best thing that works for you? I got to tell you, the whole sour candy thing has been amazing, and we have just stumbled on that recently, and it's been super helpful. So that's just kind of like the layout of how my wife and I approach it in our house. We don't give our kids too much. We want them to be kids. We don't want them to worry every day about, am I safe? But we also understand now, especially as our kids are teenagers, they do need to have some surface level information. It was different when they were young. We didn't expose them to much at all. We may have said when they were real young, like, first grade, second grade. We would prep them if we knew, hey, a lockdown drill's coming, and tell them this is really done just to make sure everybody's safe. That's about all you need to know right now. If there's ever anybody who wanted to harm somebody, this is what they would do at school to keep you safe. And then at home, we would definitely filter what they were being exposed to. We didn't want them to watch and sit down and watch all the details of school shootings on the news or violence in general, just because we know it would probably, our kids are deep thinkers, which again is a great strength, but comes with a downside in that it can stick with them for a long period of time and create more challenges and more issues moving forward. So understand your child, understand their brain, understand how much they can take. And I will also throw this one last caveat in. If your child can handle more information, please make sure that they know that not all kids are hotwired like them. And that doesn't mean that they should go to school and share all the specific details of certain violent instances that they've heard about or that they've learned about. We all need to do our part to just make sure that kids feel safe. Even though, as you and I are very well aware, society as a whole is very unstable right now. I hope all of that helps. This is a really tough conversation, and as much as I don't enjoy having it, I felt like maybe you as a dad would like to know how our families handled it. But again, I'll tell you, it's scary, and there's no easy answers for all of it. The best answer I can give you is I wish we as a society would come together to figure out ways to work together and stop hating so much. I'll probably share this in a future episode, but I grew up in upstate Pennsylvania. It was a very conservative area, and it was filled with amazing, heartfelt people. And then I went to college near a city, and I got to know all kinds of people who were amazing. And you know what? They were Democrats, many of them, and they were heartfelt people. And now I live in an area where it's pretty much 50-50. And guess what? The majority of people are very good and very kind, regardless of their politics, regardless of how they believe about certain things. It is the fringes that are creating the most instability. My wish is that we get back to being a place where we were all just working together and finding common ground and finding ways to get mental health support for those who need it. So there's my 2 cents. I hope you got something out of this conversation today. Hang in there, dads, because this is not an easy gig. Being a father, especially when we're in a nation that's unstable. But my hope is that maybe we're starting to turn a corner. I really hope that. And violence will become less. And anxiety as a whole will start to lessen too. Not just for our children, but also for us. I want to throw this out real quick. Remember, we have a YouTube channel. Love to see you over there. Check out the content we're putting there. It's different than what we have here in the audio form. And also follow, rate, review, subscribe, all those things wherever you're taking in our content. And above all, remember, this is the most important job we're ever going to do, dads. So do it the best you can. Give yourself grace when you fail in some capacity, but fail forward with a growth mindset so we don't keep making those same mistakes again. Have a great one. We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for sticking around. If you got any questions you want answered on the show, or you just want some feedback or want to share some ideas, shoot me an email, dadsallinpodcast@gmail.com, or send me a DM on any of the socials @rechargedfamily. Thanks for listening.